You know what I like to do after a long day of slaying dragons in my TTRPGs is go fishing. And that's what we have on the show today, a board game called Fantasy Fishing. The creator's on with me today. I can't wait for you to meet Robert. That interview starts now. Hey Rob, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Thanks for coming on. And you have a game that you're going to be releasing later on this year called Fantasy Fishing.
That's correct.
And why don't you tell everybody about Fantasy Fishing?
Fantasy Fishing is a relatively simple to learn board game, mostly composed of cards, where you take on a role of a character in like a fantasy world, but you're not interested in the typical fantasy role play. You're just ignoring all that to go fishing and catching all kinds of weird and wacky stuff.
That sounds like a lot of fun because I know from personal experience, I've done a lot of fishing in my games. I noticed there are all the cards in the artwork you did yourself, correct?
Yes, you betcha.
And I love the artwork. I think it's fantastic. You did a great job. Why don't you explain how the game is played?
Players will have a little angler token that represents them, and you deal out 16 cards in like a grid pattern. And at the end of each of the rows and columns, that's like the lake that your character would go on. And on each turn, your character is just picking an action. One of those actions could be moving to different lakes, using different tools, and another action is actually switching out the tools that you have. And so basically all you're doing is trying to pick the lake that's going to give you the best odds of giving you the fish that you want. And it kind of doubles as like a set collection game where you can catch all kinds of things that you would in a fantasy game. So instead of just fish, you're catching things like treasures and legendary fish with fire on their backs and mystical artifacts and rusty swords and that kind of stuff. And you're trying to compile them all together in a set collection way to basically score the most points at the end of the game.
That sounds easy.
Oh yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You make the points by making stacks of cards as you play. So you get that cool feeling of catching a bunch of stuff. By the end of the game, you've caught maybe 30 things, but because you're scoring as you play, it only takes 2 seconds at the end of the game to figure out who the winner is. So it's really like concise and fast paced and simple.
That's wonderful. How many players?
So right now it's 2 to 5.
That sounds fun. And the ages would be?
Yeah, I've played it with somebody as young as 6, but we might put 8+ because I don't necessarily want someone to think it's easier than it is, you know what I mean? But we've gone as young as 6, yeah.
So now we were in our pre-interview, I was asking if you were a fisherman.
Yeah, no, I do fish a little bit, but not as much as the people in my hometown here.
Exactly. And development-wise, this is taking a little bit of time.
Yeah. Like a big part of that is the fact that I've been doing all the artwork myself, all the graphic design myself, and I've reiterated. I've probably done the artwork 3 or 4 times before I was happy with it. So it's doubling as game production, but also a big learning procedure for me.
So as we're talking right now, I have some of your artwork up so people can see it. It really resonated with me. It looked like a lot of fun. I love these types of games because it's like a tableau builder, and then you're collecting cards, and they're fast games. They're easy to play, and there's something that you can introduce to somebody who's not really into board games.
Yeah. No, exactly. I'm really happy with, like, you know, even when I play with people who usually prefer the really, really complex games, they tend to enjoy it because if you're playing with players like that who are really competitive, you can hammer a game out in 20 minutes, and every turn there's still a decision to be made, you know? So it ends up appealing to both of those audiences, which is what I'm most excited about.
And I also like sometimes when you're dealing with those super big box board games, going back to a game that is not as complex because you need a breather. Sometimes your brain hurts.
Yeah, and that's a big part of why I actually started designing a more complicated game. You know, I wanted my first game to be something that everybody could play. Like my very first game, I'm going to show it to my mom. If I came to her with a big box game, she'd kind of roll her eyes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is going to be kickstarting soon. And I will have links down below to the Kickstarter notification page as well as to your website, which is hysterical in its own right because you love cheese and it's Cheese Lords.
That's right. Yeah.
When you play games, what is your favorite board game that you've played?
I have a hard time, honestly, labeling a favorite. And it kind of depends on what you count as a board game, right? Because some people would say anything tabletop, right? Because I grew up playing a lot of Magic the Gathering. That's kind of skirting the line. I played Dungeons and Dragons. I really like, for something quick, I really like the game Suro because it's just like a great introduction to people. I play my kind of like odd pick. I have this game called KO Castle, and it's not really super popular, but it was like my first kind of big expensive game, so I still love it to this day.
Yeah, and those games really formulate, I would imagine as a game designer, they kind of formulate what you want to design. Have you found that to be the case?
Yeah, in a way, for sure. I think, like I said with Suro, it took a lot of time before I admitted it was one of my favorite games, because I didn't want a simple game to be my favorite game. But then every time I had people over, it was always the game I took off the shelf, right? Because at the end of the day, not everyone wants to play those big games. So kind of simple with like an exploration element. And that's kind of my favorite type of game.
Yeah, me too. We went on a little stint where we started buying just really small games.
Okay.
You know, we have the card-based stuff, things like that, that was really easy to play. And we've enjoyed that. I definitely like the big games, but sometimes you're not ready for 20 minutes to set up and for
Yeah. And you have to have the right people with the big games.
From the standpoint of the game that you're launching now or in later on in the year, did you do a bunch of play testing with that?
Yeah, so I did, like when the game first started out, I've bought on Amazon like the playing cards blank size, and I just wrote on them with Sharpie marker, right? Because I didn't want, why would I go nicer? I knew I was going to change 1,000 things. So it started on that, and as I got closer to what I liked, the quality of my prototype went up with it. But yeah, I do it. Usually my process, I do a ton of just play testing with myself just to make sure there's no glaring issues. And then once I'm happy and I think, oh, this could be fun, then I have one or two buddies who are just so obsessed with board games, they'll play it with me even if it's terrible. You know what I mean? So then I'll play test with them until we're happy with it and make changes. And then once I'm happy there, then I'll move on to distanter friends, if you will. But they'll still usually kind of lie a little bit and be nice. So once I'm happy with them, then I'll give it to total strangers and play test a fourth round, you know?
Right, exactly. That takes a considerable amount of time and effort.
Oh, absolutely.
What did you find surprising during your non-friend play tests?
What did I find surprising? Sometimes, like,
Any surprising feedback?
yeah, it's funny that when people don't know the guy, they're willing to complain about anything. And this guy was like really, really passionate about how stupid it was I didn't have a purple character because his favorite color was purple. You know what I mean? So, and that's like the last thing on my mind. But it actually, you know, at first I'm joking about it, but then I'm like, I went and I Googled and I'm like, okay, well, what are the most common favorite colors? And I actually changed it. I said, if I'm going to have 6 different colors, I'll make them the 6 most common favorite colors. And purple was one of them. So I actually ended up appeasing his suggestion.
Yeah, that's it. That's a weird. I've heard the same thing from other people. Do you just get this weird feedback that makes sense because you end up being so deep into the game, you don't even see it anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
well, that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do. Well, this sounds fantastic. I will have links to everything down below, and if you've enjoyed the artwork of the game, definitely check it out. And Rob, I appreciate you coming on and chatting with me.
Yeah, of course.
Let me know if you need anything more from me.
Yeah, will do.